Hey there, welcome to the Amanda Dake Show, where today I have a super amazing guest, Daniel Gefen. Daniel went from jumping on classroom tables and getting detention for wanting attention to impacting millions of people in his underwear. We cannot wait to hear about that. He went from being completely invisible with no online following to growing his top-rated podcast to over 250,000 downloads, interviewing billionaires and world-class leaders, and becoming an international best-selling author in less than 2 years. After being pitched hundreds of times by lazy PR agencies, he launched Gefen Media Group, one of the first podcast booking agencies, and he helped influential authors sell hundreds of thousands of books by getting them on top-rated podcasts. Seeing a gap in the market for people who couldn't afford to hire a booking agency, he launched Podbooker, a platform for guests and hosts to equally and easily connect. And Daniel, another interesting thing about him, he lives in Israel with his wife of 14 years and his 5 little rascals. So you are a very busy man. We can just justify that right now.
First of all, Amanda, I am wearing pants right now.
Oh, good.
Just for the record.
So let's start with that. Tell us a little bit about that first part of your bio with entertaining people in your underwear.
Well, I mean, that was when I was 3 years old. No, I'm kidding. So essentially, I mean, I got into the podcasting space, I would say by accident, but I don't believe in accidents. I think everything happens for a reason. But it was definitely unexpected. So 4 years ago, I'm playing tennis. And, at that stage in my life, I had, built a somewhat successful business, but it was totally offline. I didn't have any online, nothing. Like I was totally, invisible, if you will. No social media following, no email lists. If you type my name into Google, I didn't exist. And I got this phone call that kind of changed everything. So this guy on the phone says to me, "Hi, Daniel. I heard you have an interesting business story. I'd like to have you on my podcast." And I'll never forget my response to him, which was, "What the heck is a podcast?" Right? So I had no idea what a podcast was. And then he explained to me, and I thought, well, that sounds really cool, especially because I've never spoken before. And even though I'm kind of this extrovert looking person, I'm actually an introvert and don't really, I much prefer to kind of be behind the scenes, even though I'm very much out in the open. And it kind of goes back to when I was in high school, where I was the class clown, but inside I was actually very depressed because I realized that people were laughing at me and not with me. And what I really wanted was, deep connection. And instead I was kind of going for the sort of attention, cheap attention, which you see on social media so much today, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I get on this podcast, and that's when I'm sitting in my underwear, staring at a blank wall. And I shared my whole story and my business and everything. And I just fell in love with the microphone, and at the end, the host said, "Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show." And I said, "Well, thank you so much for having me." But in my head, I'm thinking, who am I talking to? This guy and his mother? Like, who else is listening? Who else is listening to this thing? So I said to him, I hope you don't mind me asking this, but how many people are listening to this podcast? And I'm expecting him to say maybe 20, 30 people, which would have been great, right? And then he says, "Well, Daniel, there were over 1,000 people listening." And I almost fell off my chair. I'm like, "What? Can you repeat that? Did you say 1,000? He said, "Yeah." I said, "No, come on. Really?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Where are all these people?" He said, "They're all over the world." And he starts listing countries, and some of them I never even heard of. And I was like, this is insane. I mean, you have some of the biggest speakers in the world. They get up on stage. If there's 1,000 people in the audience, that's a packed crowd. Yeah. And there's me, who's invisible online, nobody, never spoken before. And here's, me speaking to a global audience. So that's when I realized I need to get into podcasting. Like, that was sort of the aha moment of, okay, this is going to be huge. I need to get in on this. Yeah. So 2 weeks later, I started Can I Pick Your Brain? I call it Can I Pick Your Brain because I wanted to pick the brains of the most successful entrepreneurs of our generation. Well, Amanda, there were 2 problems. One, I didn't know any successful entrepreneurs to interview. Small little problem, right? And 2 is I didn't have an audience. How do I get people to listen to this thing?
Yeah.
Right? So that's when I had, sort of that light bulb moment that went off. And I said to myself, well, hold on a second. That guy had 1,000 people listening and he had me as a guest on his show. Well, why don't I go on other people's shows as guest and just leverage their audiences instead of trying to figure this out myself and trying to grow my own audience? I'll just, go as a guest on podcasts and, they've done the hard work already building the audience, kind of like what I'm doing right now, right? Amanda,
Absolutely.
you spent all this time and effort, growing your audience. I mean, how long have you been doing this podcast for?
Almost 1 year.
So a whole year that you spent producing the podcast, editing the podcast, finding the guests, preparing for the guests, and then promoting the show, all that, you're doing all the work. And I come along and I just basically come and go, right? I
Right.
come access your entire audience and then leave, right? And I don't pay for it either, which is insane. And we'll get
Right.
to that in a minute. So I start getting on all these podcasts, and within a very short period of time, my podcast hit over 300,000 downloads, and then became a top-rated podcast. And as you said in the intro, I interviewed some very big guests. So that was the first part of the story. But the second part was I started getting bombarded with emails from people pitching themselves to be on my podcast,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like PR agencies and just entrepreneurs trying to come on the show. And I would send, 95% to spam because they all sucked. They all
Yeah.
just kind of didn't have a relationship with me. They didn't know how to position themselves. And so that's when I had another light bulb moment. And this is about 3.5 years ago. I woke up one day and said, well, hold on a second. Nobody's doing a good job of this. I'm in the industry and my friends are all top-rated podcast hosts, right? So I've got the connections already.
Yep.
And I've been a guest on 60 plus podcasts. I've interviewed over 150 guests. So I know what a great guest sounds like and how to position them. Why don't I start a podcast booking agency? That's how I got into the podcast booking space. And that's how Gefen Media Group was born. And then we can kind of go into sort of how Podbooker came about.
Right. Wow. That's fascinating. There's some really great points that you made that I just want to reiterate, especially for people that feel a little overwhelmed when it comes to launching their own business online, especially if they're not in the space. And it's, where do you get the audience? Where do you find these people that are going to listen to you, be interested in what you have to offer, and potentially become followers and then down the line customers? And this is such a great reminder. Your story and the platform itself of just podcasting allows you to use leverage from other people's efforts and take advantage of that to build your own audience, to collaborate. And you know what else that you didn't mention, but I know you already know a part of this. Not only do you get to reach their audience, but you get to have a really great connection with the person that is hosting that podcast or that you have on your own podcast. And just out of curiosity, I know my answer, but have you formed partnerships or maybe joint venture deals or other types of things just because of the relationship that you formed from the guest podcast host platform relationship?
I created an ambassador program, which is a nice word for affiliate,
Mm-hmm.
but it's, a high end, I would guess a high end affiliate program for my agency, just from the guests that I had on my show. So I had some huge, named guests who had massive audiences and networks. And I would say probably around 10 or 20 of them became ambassadors to my agency and sent me a ton of business.
Yeah.
One of them became a strategic advisor on the board of my company, and he advises, big companies like 1-800-GOT-JUNK and some other very big companies. So that was one thing. The other thing as well is, of course, clients, people who came on my show and then said, Daniel, so besides for the podcast, like, what are you doing? And I told them about Gefen Media Group, and they're like, oh man, I'm coming out with a book, and actually I want to promote it. Can you do that? Sure. And then they became clients of mine. So yeah, a lot of, and then guests on my show as well. I mean, I've had some incredible referrals from guests that I had on my show, as well as just friendships and people in my network. I mean, I interviewed the smartest man alive who hacked into NASA when he was 13 years old. And this is a crazy story, but the NSA, I think it was the NSA, they flew, because he was in Ireland at the time, and they smashed down his door of his family home because they wanted to find the person who, hacked into their system, right? It's quite a big deal, right?
That's pretty big deal.
Yeah. So his parents were home and they're like totally don't understand what's going on. And they're like, well, we only have a 13-year-old boy and he's in school right now. And they opened his bedroom and there was on his wall the blueprints to the space shuttle. And so they waited for him to come home and there was a nice surprise for him waiting. And they tried to extradite him.
Wow.
Except he had in his backpack an extradition waiver that he put together. So he was essentially untouchable. And so they had to hire him as the youngest consultant to the NSA. Anyway.
That's amazing. I have a 13-year-old and I mean, he's pretty smart, but he doesn't make his own extradition plans. That's for sure.
Well, here's the cool part about the story. So I had him on the show, and it must have been like maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, one of the other guests that I had on my show, also somebody, Cameron Harold, some people might know of him. So he posted on Facebook saying that someone hacked his bank accounts or something like that, and he was being held hostage. Essentially, they were going to, I don't know if they hacked they didn't hack his bank account. They hacked something else. They had his ID and they were going to use it.
Holding at ransom almost, right?
He was being held at ransom.
Yeah.
He was being held at ransom. So I don't know. I kind of thought, well, maybe, who knows? Maybe I could put him in touch with, with Walter O'Brien. This is the guy who I interviewed. So I quickly sent an email to Walter, CC'd Cameron and said, Cameron, meet Walter. If anyone can help you with this hacker, it's him. And next thing I know, a couple of days go by and Cameron sends me a message saying, Daniel, thank you so much. Like, Walter really helped me. And so you never know. I mean, this is, this is coming from someone who I didn't know anybody 4 years ago. Like no one. I was totally had zero network. And
now it's just grown primarily through podcasting.
It's all through podcasting. And people say, well, Daniel, but aren't I late to the game? And I always laugh at that because I think, no, because 1.5 million podcasts, that's the number of podcasts that are out there. And only about, I think it's around 800,000 that's active. Okay. So that means that there's less than 1 million podcasts. Now let's put that into contrast for a second. You've got over 100 million YouTube channels.
Yeah.
And almost 1 billion blogs. So we're nowhere near at saturation. Like we're in the really early stages. There's going to be tens of millions and hundreds of millions of podcasts, and right now we're less than 1 million. So think about that for a minute. You're really at the beginning stage, and this is the time to get in, because this is now the time when it's completely undervalued attention, and that's always where you want to go. You always want to be going where the undervalued attention is.
What do you mean by that? Explain undervalued attention.
Okay, so Google let's say my first company that I started about 9 years ago, it was a telephone answering service. So we answered calls for law firms and accountancy practices, basically all types of services. And the word telephone answering service was that was the number one keyword that you can get, right? I paid, I think it was less than $300 a month to some people in India. And I was ranked number 1 or number 2, depending on the day, but either number 1 or number 2 for that key term and like many other key terms. My phone was just ringing off the hook. Like I just, we got to over 300 clients in a very short period of time and that was undervalued attention because people didn't yet know about this whole SEO, thing. Once people started to catch on, all of a sudden Google had to start changing things around. They start changing their underwear, penguins, pandas, and polar bears, and who knows what flying around.
And it wasn't $300 anymore to be at the top.
No, it's probably tens of thousands of dollars at this point, right? So That's undervalued attention. Then, for example, pay-per-click, right? AdWords
Yep.
used to be 10 cents a click for
Mm-hmm.
keywords. Today, maybe $20 a click. Huge
Yeah,
difference.
big
Facebook
difference.
ads, Facebook ads used to be
Same.
cheap.
Yep.
Do you remember when you had a post on Facebook and 90% of your friends saw it? Yeah, those days were
Those
good,
were the
right?
days, weren't they?
Those were the days, right? Well, so here's the thing. Now let's talk about podcasting for a second. To get on a podcast today is relatively easy. It doesn't cost you any money. It's totally free. And this is the best part. It's all about attention. It's not about reach. I hear people always talk about reach, like, oh, I've got 100,000
Yeah.
this and tens of thousands of likes and whatever, or hundreds of likes. Bogus. You know, I had a post on LinkedIn as an example. I got
Mm-hmm.
over 300, I went viral. So I got over 300,000 views on this video that I posted on LinkedIn. How many clients did I get from that
How
post?
many?
Zero, right?
That's
Zero,
so
nothing.
crazy.
Yeah, nothing. So the number of views or likes or comments or interactions is really meaningless. Okay, and to sort of paint the picture, imagine you have a post on Instagram, right? Well, I imagine Susie sitting on the toilet till her thighs go numb, scrolling through her Instagram feed, right? And that's kind of who your post is going to, and she's got maybe 1.2 seconds of
Right.
attention on that. So on average, the attention span today in general is about 8 seconds, which is 1 second less than a goldfish. And on social media, it drops down to around 3 seconds.
Yeah.
You can't do much in 3 seconds of someone's attention. Now, in contrast, you've got podcasting. Over 85% of people that listen to podcasts listen to the whole thing from beginning to end. And the average podcast length is 45 minutes long. 45 minutes in today's world to have that kind of attention is a gold mine. Like, you need to
Yeah.
be jumping on that.
That's fantastic. I like it. So what did you say? Attention over
Reach.
And
For
I
me,
think
I
we're
think,
kind of programmed in, especially, and I'll speak just kind of for all these online entrepreneurs, we're so programmed to go for likes, right? And I
yeah,
want to say, as I'm saying this out loud, Facebook may have started that for us, because at the beginning, when you could advertise, you would boost basically to get more likes, right?
mm-hmm.
So now we've started to equate likes to leads almost. And now I see that shifting a lot in my own business and in reach and attention, right? The correlation between those. But I've also seen a lot of other people, especially influential people, basically reminding us that we can't go cash in likes. Like, nobody's going to take 250 likes and make your house payment with it, right?
Yeah,
So
I wish.
that's such a
Yeah.
great reminder and that's a great reminder for the people starting out. You don't have to have this huge following, right? You just have to be compelling and solve an issue for someone, right? Or entertain them somehow, or give some kind of value that they want to pay attention to you.
Yeah.
So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, this is so important because I interviewed someone on my new podcast, Grow Your Show, which is obviously how to grow a podcast, right? So I interviewed somebody who has who has I guess a podcast production agency, and they help people to monetize their podcasts, because over 85% of people who have podcasts are not monetizing them. And he said that this person had 300 listeners on their podcast. 300, right? It's a small amount.
Yeah.
Right? Relatively speaking. 300. And this person did just over $300,000 in revenue that year from that list, from that
That's fantastic.
list, which is insane. But everyone's thinking you got to have these major lists. James Schramko. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but James Schramko is one of my mentors. By the way, how did he become my mentor? He was a guest on my show.
There you go.
There you go. So James has a multiple seven figure business that's recurring revenue a year. He works, I think it's like 3 days of the week,
Mhm.
part-time. And this is the best part. He has under 10,000 people on his email list.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And that's just insane. So I think it's really important for people to realize that you don't need to go for the masses. You don't need the millions or the, hundreds of thousands. You just need your super fans. You
Yep,
need to find your super fans. And here's the question. How do you find your super fans? Is you build deep relationships with them.
absolutely.
How do you build deep relationships? It's not someone going click like, click like, click like. It's someone who hears you on a podcast for 45 minutes. They hear your story and they relate to you. So you have to be relatable.
Mhm.
You got to talk about how are you similar to them? In what way? So for example, how did I lead with my story today? I led with the fact that I didn't even know what a podcast was. So if you think, oh, Daniel, yeah,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
knows
you're
about
already here.
podcasting.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I have to become relatable. Otherwise, you're just like, well, he can't help me, but I can because I was where you were. I did not know what
Absolutely.
podcasting was. I didn't have an audience, right? And then you got to go through the breakthrough, which is what was your aha moment? How did you get that breakthrough? And for me, it was getting on a podcast and realizing, oh my goodness, there's over 1,000 people listening, and then saying, I need to get into this. And then you go to the success, which is, and then I was able to be a top rated host and have all these things. And so you take them through a journey. To be able to take someone through that type of a journey and then to share your why and to share your mission, you can't do that in 8 seconds or 30 seconds or even 3 minutes.
Yep.
You have to have the right amount of attention, and that's what podcast guesting is offering us today.
So tell me about that. You help people become great guests, right? You have a service or an agency that helps people hone in basically on their messaging around podcasting. So
Yes.
tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. So, people come to me all the time. They say, Daniel, I want to get on the top podcasts, right? So we work with the top 250 podcasts. And that's a guarantee. So we guarantee that. But what people don't realize is we don't just wave a wand and suddenly they're on the podcast. Like, hey, I'm friends with this guy, so I'll just get this person on their podcast. It doesn't work like that. It's all about positioning as well as relationships. So the first stage when I work with a client is I'm working on positioning them. And I had, I had a guy called Jim. He was 72 years old, and he, signed up to work with me. We did the deep dive strategy call. And I said to him, I said, Jim, tell me about yourself. So he says, well, Daniel, I invented this product that helps people to balance, right? And it helps athletes to become more efficient because they're able to balance. And then he starts going into sort of like the technical details of this contraption. And I said, Jim, for the love of God, please stop. You're boring me to tears. Like, killing me here. If I heard you on a podcast, I'd be switching it off so fast. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, Daniel. You asked me what I do. I said, no. I want you to tell me about you. I'm the
Yeah.
audience. I need to connect to a person. People don't buy products. They buy into people. That's why you see Nike and Coca-Cola and all these brands. What are they doing? They're building personalities. We buy into the personality behind the brand. We buy into the why behind the brand. We buy into the purpose and the mission. We want to belong to something greater than ourselves. And so if Coca-Cola tells me that I can, be happier and I could be part of a movement, then I'm going to join that. And if Nike, so these are all just mission-driven brands that understand the power of storytelling and building personalities and heroes. And that's what we buy into. So I said, Jim, can you just tell me about you? And he tries again and he starts talking about how he built this. I said, Jim, please just talk to me about why did you build this? What is it that made you build this thing? So he takes a deep breath and he says, okay, Daniel, I haven't shared this with anyone before, but I was born with a very rare condition where when I took a few steps, I would fall over. I had a terrible balance. And in school, I would always be falling all over the place. And all the kids in my class would make fun of me. They would put things in front of me, so I would lose my balance, I'd fall over, and then they'd all giggle. And one day I was sitting in the corner of the playground with, crying and feeling sorry for myself. And then I said to myself, one day I'm going to create something that's going to solve my problem and I'm going to help other people. And he had tears rolling down his face and I had tears as well. And I said, Jim, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what we connect with. So yes, people go on podcasts, they start selling their thing and, doing the whole sales thing. And it's just wrong. Just not how to do it. And I
Right.
see people doing this on social media. I see people doing this in advertising. It's just wrong. You lead with your story. Always
Yeah.
lead with your vulnerability. I had another client, Katie, who came to me and she was running a multiple 7-figure female entrepreneur consulting practice. She's very successful. And she said, Daniel, I want to get on the top female entrepreneur podcast. I said, great, I can do that for you. But first we do a strategy call. Then we do the bio. She's like, no, Daniel, please. I've done strategy calls. I've done bios. I know what I'm doing. Just get me on the podcasts, use my bio. And I took a look at her bio and I'm like, oh God, no, not one of these, right? I've read hundreds of bios that look like this, right? They're either too vague or they give away too much information, right? So if you watch a movie trailer,
Yeah.
if it's too much information, then I'm like, well, I just watched the movie. I don't need to watch the movie now. Or if it's too vague, I'm like, well, I'm not going to watch this. It's a waste of time, right? But if they give you a tease and you're like, oh, I need to know what happens, that's the key to writing a perfect bio. So we can go into that as well. But I said to her, with all due respect, Katie, this is what I do. This is what you're paying me for. So can we do it my way? And she said, nope. I just don't want to, save your time, Daniel. Just get me on the show. So I thought, okay, she's really stubborn, but whatever. She paid me and we'll do it her way and see how it goes. And I said to her, okay, but one condition. She said, sure. I said, if in 2 weeks we don't get you any bookings, we're doing it my way. And she said, fine. 2 weeks go by, crickets, nothing,
Yeah.
right? So I said, okay, Katie, we're getting on a call. She's like, fine. I said, Katie, let me be very blunt with you. Your bio just sounds like everyone else's. Like, yada, yada, yada. I'm so successful. Yada, yada, yada. I did this and this and this. Yeah. Okay, great. You're not relatable at all. The people who you're helping are not where you are right now. So you need to go back there and tell me what happened. She's like, well, yeah, I was struggling. Struggling very nice. Get deep.
Right.
Why were you struggling? She's like, that's too personal. No, I said, no. Here's the thing. You cannot get too personal. The more personal you get, the better. So let's get personal. She's like, okay, I can't believe I'm sharing this. She said, I was suffering from a severe case of Lyme disease. I couldn't feel half my body. I took my business calls in my bathtub.
Wow.
I said, Katie, there you go. She's like, no way, Daniel. I'm professional. We can't put that on my. I said, yes, we can, and we will. And she's like, next, you're going to tell me I should also share about how my brother committed suicide as well. And in the first week of me launching my business. And I said, hell to the yeah. Like that's insane that you were able to run a business at a time when you were, that's crazy. And so we did it. And within a week, she was inundated with like the top podcasts wanted her on her show. So the reason I'm sharing this, of course, is because we have to get vulnerable. That's the only way we can connect with people. And I think that's the key to getting booked on podcasts.
I think that's a fantastic reminder. And it's also a great reminder to remember who it is that you're wanting to be helping in the first place. And most people that I work with want to help people that are in a place where they used to be, right? Because like I love to help people leaving, the 10 to 12 to 14 hour work days and wanting to create more time freedom, right? To spend with their families or to do whatever they want with it, but we forget what we were like when we were working those 10 to 12 to 14 hour days, or even before we started working those 10 to 14 hour days. What were we doing even back further? We kind of don't want to go back there sometimes, but it's so important because you're right. People can't relate to say like a before and after for a fitness ad, right? You see the bikini model ready for competition and you're like, Yeah, but she's got a personal chef and she's got a trainer and that's her job. That's all she does is work out every day. I could never do that. So if all we see is that person like modeling and, looking completely ripped and amazing, we can't put ourselves in those shoes.
Mm-hmm.
But if we see who that person was when they started,
Mm-hmm.
and especially if that person looks like me now, then you can see the possibility. We
Yep.
forget a lot about that. I work with so many people, and I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes I don't want to go back and talk about that stuff because it's not me anymore. But because I went through all of those things, I can now help so many more people maybe avoid some of those mistakes or some of those pitfalls or some of the trials that I had to go through to get where I am now. And that's really what my business is all about. And most people that I work with also, we have this big heart to serve, right? And the best way to do that is to be relatable, to be approachable as well, right? Because if you're just
Yeah.
throwing out all of this perfectly made persona, nobody's going to even approach you because they don't think that you would even want to talk to them. And that's not
Yeah.
who I am, and that's not who most people that I work with are either. They want to
I
be
used to I used to binge Gary V, right? I
yeah.
used to be a big fan. And I started getting very overwhelmed. Like I started watching him and seeing his stuff and just getting so overwhelmed. Like, oh, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to get the kind of exposure and the following and that kind of like, there's no way I'm going to be able to get there. And then one day I said to myself, do you know what, Daniel? He started somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Go back, find a very old video of him and see how unpolished he was. So I did. I went on YouTube. He became famous on YouTube. And by the way, talking about undervalued attention, that's how Gary Vee became Gary Vee. He found YouTube before everyone else, and he basically started posting on there every single day. He posted every day for 1,000 days.
And
Right?
regardless of who was watching, if anybody was watching, he was
Yep.
still just doing it.
Yep. He even shared that he was getting like 10 views on a video. He kept doing it. 1,000 days. That's over 3 years, right? So
Yeah.
that means every single day for 3 years, even though he was getting very little traction because it was so early to the market that people were not really watching YouTube videos at that time. So I went to his very first YouTube. And if you are a Gary Vee fan, I would highly recommend you do this because I think we all look up to people and we idolize them and think it's impossible to be them. But
Yeah.
when you go back to their beginnings, you see, oh my goodness, I went to Gary Vee's episode #1 on YouTube and oh my goodness me, holy cow, this guy, wow. I mean, he doesn't know how to do anything. I mean, he sounds funny, he looks funny, his camera angle is totally off. It looks like a joke. Like, what the heck? Who is this guy? That's the Gary Vee that we see today. That's all over the place, and everyone's
Yeah.
like, "Oh my God, can I have a selfie?" Well, he was that guy just kind of faffing around, right?
Yeah.
It's so important to go there and to look back sometimes because we do get so overwhelmed by people's
I think
success.
that's fantastic. One thing too about Gary Vee, when Twitter first came out,
Hmm.
Gary Vee was all over that platform too.
Yes.
And he was not well known. And in fact, I think he had just written his first book, and I don't know the name of it at the top of my head. But I live in Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma City, this was way back in like 2010, I want to say, maybe even earlier than that, 2009. He did a book tour basically through Twitter, and you could win like him coming to your city to come and talk with your group or whatever. So in Oklahoma City, we had a small network of business owners and professionals and just regular people. I was a teacher at the time. So, and I don't know how that's kind of how all my stuff started, is getting involved with Twitter and Facebook at the very beginning. But we had tweet ups, right? Where we would get together at restaurants and just have cocktails and snacks and meet each other in person. This was the first time that people had met online, right, via Twitter, and then got to meet in person, and like you felt like you knew them, right? And so now we're pretty used to that. especially
Yeah.
if you go to any kind of networking events or conferences and you connect with people online and then you finally get to see them in person, you feel like you already kind of know them. And that's really
Oh yeah.
what that was like. But I remember Gary Vee was super, and he still is very intentional, and he does do a lot of his own correspondence through the social media, replying to people and things like that. But he came to our city with his book, and it was, before he was anything like he is now.
Yeah.
So, and that's again where you're saying this, what do you call it? Undervalued attention?
Yeah. Undervalued attention.
Yeah, that's what that platform was too at that time. It probably was
Hmm.
when he was starting out with the YouTube as well.
Oh,
Uh,
for sure. For
so it
sure.
makes such a difference. But I want to say something about that. As little platforms get launched, and, like TikTok, for example, if your
Yeah.
audience is on TikTok, go for it, right?
Hmm.
My audience is not. So it's not necessary for me personally to be over there. I would rather
Yeah.
put my time and effort into a place or places where my people are going to find me and hang out and get to know me.
Hmm.
So that's where, like, if Gary Vee was on YouTube and Twitter and all these other things, it was a little bit different then because everything was really new. But
Yeah.
now people typically have their preferred platforms that they hang out on. And just the one key is like identifying where they are and just focusing on that. You don't have to be everywhere at one time. I
Yeah.
think it's
But
super
also
important.
also bear in mind that there are certain platforms that your, people could be on, but it's so noisy there. And that's the thing. Like Facebook, I mean, I'm sure all of the people that I, would like to work with are probably on Facebook and LinkedIn, but it's really noisy.
Very
Right. And
noisy.
again, we go back to what I said before, which is all about attention. It's you got to go where you can get the most attention.
Yeah.
That's it. And what you said earlier, by the way, is very interesting. You said that you felt like you knew him. Like when you met Gary Vee in person, you felt like you knew him. That is so key.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can get that status where someone, by the time they're on a call with you, feels like they know you, and I get this all the time. I get people, literally, I do a sales call with someone, and I'm about to go into my spiel and my backstory, and they go, no, Daniel, you don't need to, I know you already. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I've been listening to you on podcasts. I've heard your story. How much is it? Tell me the budget. I want to work with you. Now that is literally gold because you don't have to sell anymore because
No.
they know you already. They
And you
feel like
never had to
you're
sell to begin with, really.
right, right, right. Because the key to selling is essentially just sharing who you are, how you can help people, and that's it. And so I had I had someone on my podcast who said that he had a podcast listener who became a client, but when he got on a sales call with him, he said, Mike, I know you already because, we go to the gym together. And, and this guy's like, we go to the gym. I haven't been to the gym in like 6 months. He's like, no, come on. We go to the bathroom together. He's like, okay, dude, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, I listen to you on my podcast. I listen to your podcast when I'm like at the gym, when I go to the bathroom. And he's like, oh, okay. I was about to call the cops. I'm just, yeah. But that's, you become almost stalked, like people binge listen you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredible. And, for me, I feel like with podcasting, it's binge, I guess, binged
Yeah.
content, if you will.
I
Yeah.
think it's fantastic. So let's shift gears just a little tiny bit and talk a little bit about this amazing platform that you've launched really recently called Podbooker. So tell us about that. And I think it's fantastic. I'm on it. I've referred it out to so many people. And now when this goes live, I'm going to continue to push that out for
Yay.
others. So tell us about what Podbooker really is.
So about a year ago, I kind of had this idea. Well, I'm only serving a small market, right? There's only so many people that can afford to hire a booking agency, right? We charge thousands of dollars. So on the flip side, you've got all these hosts, like 1.5 million hosts that are looking for guests, but I'm only serving 250 of them, like top
Right.
250s. So there's, a million hosts that need guests. And then you've got at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that want to be guests on podcasts, but they can't afford to pay an agency thousands of dollars. Who's serving them? How are they
Yeah.
finding podcasts? And that's when I had the idea for podbooker.com, which essentially is a marketplace where guests can easily, pitch hosts. They can set up a profile, a guest profile, and hosts can go on the platform, set up a podcast profile, and they can invite guests on their show. And what's really cool is that we've included features like getting reviews from hosts. So you can actually ask hosts for a review as a guest, which doesn't exist, by the way, anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on over 60 podcasts, and two things. One, I don't remember the podcasts I've been on, which is a problem because, you want to showcase those things, because the more
Yeah.
podcasts you've been on, the bigger podcast. Everyone asks me, how do I get on bigger shows? The best way to get on bigger shows is get on smaller shows. And then you
Right.
get on bigger shows, because then people say, oh, you've been on like 50 podcasts. Like, wow, this guy, he's been on a lot of podcasts. But what if you can have reviews from hosts? So first of all, on Podbooker, on the guest profile, you can list all the podcasts that you've been on. So you have like all the artwork. It looks
Yeah.
great. It looks like a podcast portfolio essentially. And two is you collect reviews from hosts. And now when a host looks at your guest profile, they say, oh, look, Daniel was on Amanda Dake Show, and Amanda said he was the best guest she ever had. Like, so that we got to have him on the show, right?
Yeah.
The other thing as well is, one of the things I found, which is really frustrating, even as an agency, is the amount of communication that goes back and forth between a guest and a host, booking and scheduling, and sometimes you have to reschedule and, fill out this form and, And sometimes inboxes get very stuffed, like mine is about over
Yeah.
24,000 emails in there. And, I just get overwhelmed. And when someone's pitching me, they're just not a priority right now, because right
Right.
now I'm focusing on something else. But on Podbooker, the host is there to do one thing, and that is find guests, right? And as a guest, you're there to do one thing, and that's get booked. So it's everything becomes native to the platform. And so you're not going out anywhere.
Yep.
There's no noise. And that's, I think, the key. And that's why in less than 2 months, we have over 1,000 users. And what's even more impressive is the fact that we've had over 600 podcast guests booked on the platform, over 600 bookings done.
Yep.
in less
how
than
much
2 months.
time? Super fast.
Less than 2 months.
Yeah.
We launched less than 2 months ago. And so we have a 24% acceptance rate, which is unheard of in this industry.
Yeah. There's people that I've referred over. Of course, they're very thankful that I introduced them to your platform. But the most recent one I remember, she reached out to me and posted in one of our mastermind groups, actually, that she booked the day that she signed up, she booked on 3
Wow.
podcasts.
Yeah.
And
Love hearing that.
then she also now reached back out to me. Now she's going to be a guest on my show too.
Yay.
But she's also been able to book guests on her podcast. So it's really is just an invaluable resource, especially for people that are really just starting out in this online business journey, and they don't have the connections or the network. They don't know where to start. Well, here it is. This is where you can start. And one thing that's also amazing, this isn't about spending money on lead generation, Facebook ads, figuring out swipe up stories or anything else, right? You don't even need to build a Facebook group to do this. You can just come on and share your story, share your purpose, and get the attention of people that actually do want to work with you without really spending a fortune. And I just think it's fantastic. Plus, you get a lot of practice. You got to start somewhere, right? Speaking, interviewing, being interviewed. And just like this, we're on video as well as we'll be on audio. So I know a lot of people are nervous about being on video. Well, the only way you're going to get past it is to be on video. So
yeah. And let me tell you something. When I started my podcast, I couldn't listen to my voice. I couldn't hear myself back.
I hear that all the time. Yep.
I sounded like a dying cat. Like, seriously, that's what I thought. I'm like, oh my God, who is that guy? It's not me. And then I got used to it. Like as time went by, I kept doing it, and then I just got really used to it. Now I kind of like the sound of my voice. It
That's
sounds
so
strange.
nice. And
Sounds
that's
strange to
so
say that.
true. The only way that you're going to like the sound of your own voice is to hear it over and over again.
That's
I
it.
was like that too.
Yeah.
I used to cringe kind of when I would hear
Hmm.
like the pitch of my voice, or I always thought
Yeah.
maybe I sounded like a little kid or whatever it
Yeah.
was. And now this is it, you know? And the same with video too. You just got to do it, and you get practice by doing it too. So you might change some things, or
Yeah.
you might.
And you,
And let's say this too: you don't need a lot of fancy equipment. Okay, I
yep.
hear a lot of people think like, "Well, I don't have all these things." Man, technology, your phone is amazing. Like, you can do so much with what you have. You just got to start. That's really the whole point of all of this, is like, okay, we know that you need an audience, you need attention. All right, you've given them the solution for that. Here's how you start. You have like 10 Facebook friends, and you have never done you don't even have email lists. I talked to somebody yesterday in a workshop that I hosted. His email list was he started a spreadsheet in Excel to keep emails of people.
Oh
And
my.
yeah, so but he was, he's on this journey learning and doing everything, but we all start with nothing. We all do.
Yeah.
Nobody just starts out and go, "Oh, I'm just an expert at digital marketing now and I just have it all together." No, we all
Yeah, and that,
started somewhere.
I'm glad you brought up the whole email list thing, because here's one of my biggest issues with social. They own you. You know,
Absolutely.
they own you. Like Facebook owns you. That's a scary, scary, scary thought, because going back to my story about my first company with SEO and Google, and how I was, when they changed their algorithm, I no longer had a business. I had no business.
Yeah,
Like they had my business by the balls. Like
absolutely.
that's just how it was. And I told myself, I said, I can't believe that I allowed my whole business to be dependent on a third party. That's scary. And people make that mistake with Facebook and with YouTube and with any of these platforms. You have to remember that they're a business. They want your money. So the free game only lasts so long. Well, here's the thing: with your email list, you own that always.
Absolutely.
No one can ever take that away from you. And every single email you send will always be seen by the person you send it to, as opposed to with social media. And so my strategy, and this is the go strategy, if anyone asked me today, Daniel, if you were to start all over again, right, what would you do?
Hmm.
It's very simple. Right now, how do you find people? You be a guest on as many podcasts as you can get yourself on. That's how you get in front of people today. Then you get them into your email list. You
Yes.
build that list, and you get so super focused and forget everything else. Facebook groups and all these things are great, but I'm telling you, that's not what's going to put money in your bank. What's going to put money in your bank is when you grow a list of people who really understand you, relate to you, want your help. And you just keep building that. You get on lots of podcasts, you build the list, and then you have an offer, and you put out the offer, and you'll see you get your first sale, and you're like, oh my goodness, someone actually
It
bought, right?
works.
It works. This is crazy. And then you get the second sale and the third sale, and before you know it, you're just making a living doing what you love. And
Yeah.
that's what happens.
So amazing. So really, how can people find it? And what do they do?
Oh, they
Tell
just go
us
to
about it.
podbooker.com. Very simple, very easy, and it's free to join. So you don't have to put any money up right now. You just go on the platform. It's free. Set up your profile. My advice is, don't be lazy with setting up the profile.
Yeah.
I've seen people, they kind of just put in the minimum, the bare minimum. Oh, I'll just set this up. If you really want people to take you seriously and you want to get accepted on podcasts, like really fill it out, take time. This is your ticket to getting on podcasts. So put in the time to do it. And when you reach out to the hosts on the platform, for the love of God, don't just say, hey, I'd like to be a guest on your show. No, like, get personal. Tell them why you're going to be a good guest. Tell them what you're going to give them, what value you're going to bring to them. Tell them you're going to share the episode. Tell them you're going to rate and review, or actually go and rate and review their podcast, and then take a screenshot and send it to them. And you got to give value first as well. So listen to their podcast. Actually know what their audience is, and what topics they like to talk about, and tell them, hey, I can help you with this, and I can help your audience in this way. Yeah, that's
It's
my advice.
just
So
basic relationship building. If anybody has an account on LinkedIn and you get spammed in your inbox every day by a virtual assistant just copy and pasting a
yeah.
message, don't do that. It doesn't,
Mm,
I don't know why people still do it. It must work somehow. It must be a volume play. But I know from experience, me personally, I am a very much connection relationship person. And when I get a copy and pasted message, I don't even read it all.
yeah.
So it just doesn't work for me. And
Look, I mean,
it,
it might work short term, right?
it might.
But it's short. It's very short term. It's not a long term approach. You want to build a real business and a real brand. The only way is to build the relationships. That's the only way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we touched on it just briefly, but I just can't iterate enough. And it's so exciting that you can form such amazing relationships with really cool people, but you also those can turn into such great business opportunities and growth opportunities, live event opportunities, virtual event opportunities. So much can come from just putting yourself out there, maybe getting out of your comfort zone if you're not used to being a guest or even a host of anything. It can change everything, and you just don't know what's going to happen unless you get started.
Yeah, and stop preparing, because preparation is fear in disguise.
Yeah, you can sit here and prepare constantly. You're not ever like, just go for it. And
Yeah.
honestly, I don't script my podcasts, right? I don't have the list of 5 questions that I want to ask every single person. Initially, I wanted to do that. Like, everyone was just like the same format,
Yeah.
robotic almost. But now I really just like it to flow and go where it needs to go. I mean, do you think that's a good strategy? I don't want to talk about podcast strategy. I mean, we could be here for weeks talking
Yeah.
about all ins and outs, but initially I've been on podcasts that it's like the 7 answers in 7 minutes or something,
No, no, no. Yeah. Yeah.
and I kind of like those because they're quick little listens. But at the same time, it's just not very conversational. It's just
No.
like, just fill out my survey and then there you go. I don't even need you to be on there. So I love to see just where the discussion goes, and it allows you to build even that deeper relationship about, maybe you say something that I can relate to. We have kids, and who knows where that conversation would go, and that's not going to happen from a scripted set of questions that I ask.
Yeah. No, I hate the scripted thing. I never was into that.
Yeah.
But if you're starting out, then you should have some sort of framework of where you want to go. You don't want to
Yep.
just have a conversation that goes nowhere. You want to be intentional, right? The most successful people are people who have intent. They have intent. They're
Hmm.
very intentional people. So, have sort of like a goal of where you want to go, and steer the conversation in that way, but don't be too rigid.
Yeah.
Be okay with, see, here's the thing is, when you know where you want to go, you can take a detour, right? Because you can always go back on track because you have
Yep.
clarity on where your end goal is with the conversation. So I can I can talk about anything, literally. I mean, Amanda, you can ask me anything about anything and I'll talk about it, but I know that I'm going to steer it back to where I want to go in the end.
Yeah.
And that's what a great interviewer can do, and that's also what a great guest can do.
I agree with that. So I'm going to steer it back to really the whole purpose of this time together. And it's really
Yeah.
all about leverage. And you've really created a way to help people of all abilities and starting at all levels, the newbie to the seasoned, business owner. Uh, you've given them a platform to connect with people, to leverage their audiences and their hard work and their time, right? And I think it's so important. I talk about leverage all the time when I'm helping people go from that hustle and grind 10 to 12 to 14-hour day lifestyle to building the life that they really want, which isn't working behind a computer 14 hours a day. So
You
I
don't
think,
have to hustle your face off, Amanda. You got to hustle your
no,
face off. Gary Vee says you got to hustle your face off.
maybe my hustle looks a little different these days.
Yeah.
That's all it is. I'm not just lazy, right? I still do things, but I like to tell people and teach people to shift from building their life around their business to now building their business around their life. And
Yeah.
you know, I was that person for so long, and now it's almost like once you hit that place, you want to scream it from the mountaintops and show everybody else what's possible and that there is a better way. And if anything that this year has taught us, it is that there are things more important than the hustling your face off. How about that?
You know what the most beautiful part about me being an entrepreneur is? Today, my daughter turned 8, and in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, I was able to play piano with her and celebrate her birthday, and I didn't need to be anywhere.
Yeah. I love
That's,
that. I got
you
goosebumps.
know, that's what it's about.
It is. It is. And now it doesn't mean like you threw the whole day away, right? You did the thing you
No,
wanted to do.
that was the most important. That was the
Absolutely.
highlight of my whole,
And that's a shift in perspective, I think, is showing people you can have both.
for sure.
It's so important. So thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm
Thank you.
going to have you back because I took a bunch of notes and there's so many other things that I'd love to talk about, but I just don't want to keep it going and going because we'd never stop. So tell us real quick, how can we find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you if we want to work with you? Your agency is amazing, by the way. And if you're in the position that you're ready for something like that, but obviously Podbooker is another place to find you. But tell us where we can find you and get in touch.
Yeah, so if you're looking to hire the agency, you can go to gefenmediagroup.com and find out more about what we do there and get in touch that way, or like podbooker.com, just sign up there, and then you'll get emails from me as well, because I like to keep up with my users. And if you join Podbooker now, you're an early adopter, so you're in my family, and I'll respond to emails that you send me as well. So you'll have my email. Those are the two best ways.
Yeah, I say go get in now, period. If nothing else, get your account started at Podbooker because it really is the fastest way to start getting booked and to get guests. I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
Congratulations for creating that. And thank you for creating it. It's going to help so many people.
Amen. I really hope
Amen.
It does.
Thanks, Daniel. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Amanda. Looking forward to coming back.
Hey, thanks for checking out this video. Subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't done that already. And if you'd like to check out more of our videos, go ahead and just tap the screen right here.